on the app.
The news now on BBC One at 10 o'clock with Sophie Rayworth.
Tonight at 10, Donald Trump becomes the first president in US history to be impeached twice after last week's assault on Capitol Hill.
The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
10 Republicans join Democrats in voting for the president to face trial for inciting insurrection.
He must go. He is a clear and present danger to the nation that we all love.
The formal charge comes after a violent mob of his supporters stormed the Capitol. It's now surrounded by a ring of steel with just a week left of the Trump presidency. The other main story tonight, the UK records its highest daily death toll since the pandemic started. More than 1,500 people have died. The Prime Minister warns that there's a very substantial risk that intensive care units could be overwhelmed as doctors plead for the public to stay at home.
I think people really don't understand what the real impact of what they're doing is, that so many patients are ending up in hospital, and so many of the patients that are ending up in hospital are ending up incredibly sick in intensive care beds.
Completely unacceptable, says the Prime Minister, as he promises immediate action to address food parcels provided to some children who get free school meals in England. And beating the odds and fulfilling a dream. Britain's Francesca Jones has a rare genetic condition, but it hasn't stopped her qualifying for the Australian Open.
And coming up in sport on BBC News, results from the Premier League as Tottenham look to gain ground on the leaders, but can they secure victory over Fulham?
Good evening. With just a few days left after 4 tumultuous years in power, Donald Trump has just become the first president in US history to be impeached twice. Members of the US House of Representatives have formally charged him with inciting insurrection after last week's deadly assault by his supporters on the Capitol. The impeachment vote was to decide whether or not the president should stand trial. The answer was yes. He will now go on trial in the upper house, the Senate, though it's not sure when. Donald Trump is one of just 3 presidents to be impeached, and now the only one to be impeached twice. The vote took place in the last half hour, and North America editor John Sopel has the very latest on this extraordinary development. John.
Sophie, this time last Wednesday, there was a riot going on in Congress. Today, Donald Trump has been impeached for a second time. This time next Wednesday, Joe Biden will be president. Whatever Donald Trump hoped would be his legacy, it can't have been this. As a real estate developer, he loves seeing his name on tall buildings, on the Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue, the Trump Hotel in Washington, the Trump golf courses in Scotland. But now his name will be forever linked with the Congress and Capitol Hill, and for all the wrong reasons.
On this vote, the ayes are...
The moment when Donald Trump carved himself an unwelcome niche in American history, becoming the first president to be impeached twice.
Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
As dawn broke over the nation's capital, the place was somehow unrecognizable. The landscape had changed. It now feels like the front line, a garrison town, with the elegant marble corridors, a barracks. The Civil War president, Abraham Lincoln, looking down on resting servicemen. But impeachment 2.0 is different, very different. For a start, the US Congress, where this is being heard, is also the crime scene, where the Trump-supporting mob descended last week.
Almighty God, wield your sword and penetrate the confusion and discontent of our country.
And this isn't about some call to a Ukrainian politician. This is about an assault on the sacred heart of US democracy that Donald Trump is charged with inciting.
The president must be impeached, and I believe the president must be convicted by the Senate, a constitutional remedy that will ensure that the Republic will be safe from this man who was so resolutely determined to tear down the things that we hold dear and that hold us together.
This was not a protest. This was an insurrection. This was a well-organized attack on our country that was incited by Donald Trump.
Last time round, every Republican voted as a bloc to back the president. But now they're splitting three ways. There are those backing his impeachment.
Today we make history forever, so choose well. A vote to impeach Donald Trump means years from now you can look your grandchildren in the eye and say, I did the right thing.
The gentleman's time is...
There were those questioning the impeachment process, but not backing Donald Trump.
We need to recognize we are following a flawed process. We need to recognize that people of goodwill can differ. We need to recognize that while the House may be done with this matter after today's vote, it will not be done for the country.
And a few whose support for Donald Trump is undimmed.
Today, the second annual impeachment of President Trump isn't really about actual words spoken out of rally. No. This is all about, Madam Speaker, the unbridled hatred of this president.
The president made his first foray out of the White House yesterday, warning somewhat ominously that his supporters would be very angry if impeachment went ahead. But today a new statement issued. In light of reports of more demonstrations, I urge that there must be no violence, no law-breaking, and no vandalism of any kind. That is not what I stand for, and it's not what America stands for. I call on all Americans to help ease tensions and calm tempers. Thank you. Today, Airbnb announced that it was cancelling all bookings in Washington for next week. Some hotels are doing the same to stop potential rioters coming in. The capital is becoming a citadel.
And just on the security situation, there are now more troops deployed in Washington, D.C. than there are US troops in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. So what happens next? Well, the trial will take place in the Senate, and Mitch McConnell, the current Republican majority leader, says it's not going to happen before Joe Biden takes over as president. So there's going to be some delay. And that will raise the question in many people's minds, well, what's the point of going ahead with this if Donald Trump has already left office? Well, one is it could debar him from ever holding office again. But the point that a Democratic congressman made today when asked that question, he said, yeah, it may be late, but it is never too late to do the right thing.
Our North America editor, John Sopel in Washington. Thank you. The UK has recorded its highest daily death toll. More than 1,500 people have died. The Prime Minister has warned that there is still a very substantial risk of intensive care units in hospitals being overwhelmed. The high number of new infections due to the new variant and more household mixing during the Christmas period are still working their way through the NHS, with the number of hospital admissions and deaths likely to remain high over the next few weeks. Fergal Keane and cameraman Dave Bull report from Imperial Healthcare's St Mary's and Charing Cross hospitals in London. A warning, their report begins with some flashing images.
It is Britain's tale of two realities. Lockdown streets much busier than before, and just minutes from here,
even though I can't hear what you're saying, you are very safe.
the voices of one pandemic day.
And there are a lot of noises going on.
I'm Dr. Wong. I'm the other consultant. Lovely to meet you. How are you feeling today?
So much better. I genuinely thought I was going to die. I surrendered. It was the stage where suicide for me was probably an easier option than to go through. I can't put into words. I honestly cannot put into words how terrifying and how merciless I was to it 6 days ago. I genuinely thought I was never going to see my family again.
Yeah, put it down. In the CPAP unit at St Mary's Hospital, oxygen is applied to help breathing. Since we first visited last April in the first wave, the ward's been expanded. Knowledge is far greater.
We are now a lot more aware of the propensity to deteriorate very quickly, and we're a lot more vigilant at monitoring patients.
Nowhere is that vigilance more important than intensive care. This is Charing Cross Hospital.
Hello there, sorry, I'm just having a bit of emergency.
The patient's blood pressure has suddenly dropped.
Should we just get him head down? Very quick and simple manoeuvre is lie a patient's head flat down, and it just improves the blood pressure, get the feet up in the air.
People can deteriorate very quickly.
Very rapidly, it's incredibly sudden.
The swift intervention worked. It's daunting to watch the pressure now faced by medical staff. Across Imperial's 3 London hospitals, they're stretched, coping with the surge in cases.
It's emotionally and psychologically totally exhausting. You're constantly thinking about work and the pressures, and knowing that the nurses are really stretched and that there aren't enough on duty, and that's incredibly stressful and very difficult to switch off from.
Every hospital is its own community, a story of interdependence at every level. From caterers like Maria from India and Grassa from Portugal, to a cleaner like Sarah from Sierra Leone, who came to the UK as a child to escape civil war.
What's it like being part of this effort to beat COVID?
Yes, I'm happy to be part of this, to save people, because I like saving people.
What's changed since I was last here? Well, the sheer volume of cases, the intensity, and a sense that the staff, still immensely professional, of course, but they're getting tired, and why wouldn't they be? And I also pick up a frustration with people who flout the rules and those voices in the public sphere who challenge lockdown regulations or try to play down the pandemic.
I'm sorry, it's just crazy. They need to see this. There are young people, fit, well people of all ages just being struck down by this virus, and it does kill people. It's not a fake news, it's not made up, it's real.
Staff aren't cut off from the reality of lockdown for the wider community, the mental health, the work issues. The spring days of clap for carers when we filmed Dr. Ali Sanders outside her home seem very distant.
For people who've lost their jobs who are struggling to survive, I think we do really understand that this is, people probably feel like they've had enough. But the vaccine's rolling out. It is our only way out of this. And we'll get there eventually.
At St Mary's Hospital, Robert Taylor recites the Lord's Prayer in gratitude for his deliverance and the medics fighting COVID today, every day. Fergal Keane, BBC News.
From tomorrow, some high street pharmacies in England will begin vaccinating priority groups with the COVID-19 jab as part of the plans to speed up the vaccination programme. You can't just turn up, though. You still have to be invited to go. Our health editor, Hugh Pym, has more.
High street pharmacies will be brought into the mass vaccination effort from tomorrow. In England, staff at some community outlets will start doing jabs for priority groups. This pharmacy in Macclesfield, receiving doses this afternoon, will be one of the first.
It's an honour to be part of that group, which is a relatively small group. And hopefully the team and I can help to see the end of the pandemic.
The push to get people vaccinated is being stepped up. Here in Dudley, health officials have launched an initiative to encourage those in BAME communities to sign up for injections.
It's really our vulnerable population. They're the ones that we really have to protect as soon as possible. So it's great to see the number of people that have turned up today and are going through the system and getting those jabs done.
Be feeling for your shoulder joint.
In Blackburn, volunteers were continuing with the training required to become vaccinators.
Holding the skin taut.
And ministers say they're on track with the target of offering jabs to 15 million people from 4 top priority groups.
We have a clear line of sight for volumes all the way through till end of February, which means I'm confident of hitting the target of the 4 most vulnerable cohorts being offered a vaccine by mid-February.
And you're happy? Any questions?
The Scottish Government said vaccinations could rise to 400,000 a week by the end of February. Northern Ireland's executive reported that more than 100,000 had been carried out there so far. Based on vaccine doses administered per 100 people, Israel has done the most with about 22. The UK is one of the next highest with around 4 per 100 in the population, ahead of other European nations like Denmark, Italy, Germany, and a little below that, France. But some GPs say supplies are unpredictable, including a practice doing vaccinations at this indoor bowling centre in North Tyneside, They say with better planning, they could do a lot more jabs.
We do not know from week to week how much vaccine we're going to get, and we do not get information about when we're going to get that vaccine until very late. And that's one of the things that is making this more challenging for us.
Ministers say available supplies are limiting the rate of expansion. Some doctors are frustrated they've had to halt doing jabs while vaccine doses are diverted to areas where there's been a slower rollout, though NHS leaders argue this is unavoidable.
The amount of vaccine being administered and given to people is incredible. But what we need to do is make sure that it's level across the country, not overly manage it, but make sure that somebody isn't getting into groups 5 and 6 when somebody in their over 80s in another part of the country hasn't been offered their vaccine.
Hello, Mary.
For these residents of a care home in Birmingham, the vaccine became a reality today.
That's your sticker for your vaccine?
Including Vera, who's 106. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
So the latest government figures show a slowdown in new cases. There were 47,525 new coronavirus infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. That's about 15,000 lower than this time last week. In the last week, an average of 53,539 new cases were reported per day. But the numbers being admitted to hospital are still on the rise across the UK. Last week, there were on average more than 33,000 people in hospital with coronavirus. 1,564 deaths were reported. That's people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test, the highest daily recorded death toll so far. It does mean that for the first time since the start of the pandemic, more than 1,000 deaths were announced on average every day in the past week. 84,767 people have now died in the UK. The UK's programme of mass vaccinations is being rolled out. In the last 24 hours, another 207,661 people have had their first dose of one of the 3 approved COVID-19 vaccines. So in total, more than 2.6 million have now had their first dose. Well, our health editor Hugh Pym is here, and another terrible daily death toll, the number of deaths recorded in the past 24 hours. And the awful thing is it's expected to get even worse.
Yes, Sophie, that figure of more than 1,500 daily reported deaths is shocking. It's 300 more than the peak reached on a day last April. Of course, these are reported deaths. They include deaths that have occurred before now, but the vast majority have happened in recent days. And of course, they relate to cases, infections, which were picked up a couple of weeks back from now. Hospital admissions are up 35% week on week, again, because of infections going back a week or so. If you look at new cases, new daily reported infections, it's a different trend. Down now week on week, down 7%. Now that might reflect the impact of lockdown restrictions and the beginning of some sort of easing off, though we do need more data, more days ahead to see what sort of trend there is. But when it comes to deaths, because it reflects what's happened a few weeks ago, it seems fairly likely, inevitable probably, that cases will result in further deaths from now and that death toll rising.
Hugh Pym, thank you. In Scotland, further restrictions are being introduced to try to tackle the spread of the virus. Among the changes which come into force on Saturday are a toughening of the rules around click and collect services. Only shops selling essential items such as clothing, baby equipment, homeware and books will be allowed to offer this service. Customers will also no longer be able to go inside takeaway food and drinks venues. The British Medical Association has called on Public Health England to review urgently its guidance on PPE for healthcare staff who are treating coronavirus patients amid growing concern that not enough staff are issued with the highest grade equipment. Our science editor David Shookman reports.
Covered in protective layers and breathing through masks with filters, staff in intensive care are kept safe from the virus. But out on the wards, there's a lower standard of equipment, especially for masks, because the official view is that there's less risk. Yet 46,000 medical staff are off sick. Droplets from coughs can spread the virus. And there's also evidence of tiny particles known as aerosols, a particular risk indoors, including in hospitals.
It starts to spread out within the room. Now, if you don't have clean air coming in and sort of flushing it out of the room and replacing that contaminated air, they'll just build up to levels that if you inhaled, you could become infected.
The risk from infected aerosols drifting in the air is recognised in intensive care and other units, which is why staff working there are given a high grade of PPE, including a kind of face mask called FFP3, which has a filter designed to screen out any small particles floating around. But the vast majority of COVID patients are on general wards, and staff working there are given thinner surgical masks, which are thought to be less effective against those aerosols. And the rate of infection among staff on general wards is twice as high as in intensive care.
Yeah. We will be able to get you to see your wife, okay?
This consultant, Matt Butler, faces COVID patients on the wards, often when they've just arrived and are at their most infectious. Like many, he believes surgical masks aren't enough. He says the FFP3 masks are better with a tighter seal, and many health workers have been calling for them for months.
The vast majority of the healthcare workforce that look after COVID patients, in light of all this evidence, just feel like their backs have been turned against us, and that we're less important. We're seen as more expendable almost.
Is one of the doctors here?
Several hospitals are now issuing FFP3 masks to everyone caring for COVID patients. Official guidance says that isn't needed. The Department of Health and Social Care says the safety of staff has always been the top priority and that guidance will change if needed. David Shukman, BBC News.
Boris Johnson says it's far too early to say whether the lockdown in England can be relaxed in the middle of February. But the Prime Minister, who was appearing in front of a committee of senior backbench MPs, said lockdown measures are starting to show signs of some effect. Our political editor Laura Kunsberg reports.
An emergency in many ways. A moment when the state is asking so very much of the public, and questions about the Prime Minister's handling form a long queue. Boris Johnson almost alone, waiting for questions from MPs at home. First up, what is the risk of the greatest fear? The NHS being overwhelmed.
Do you think we're going to have enough critical care beds, ICU beds, for those who need them?
The risk is very substantial, and we have to keep the pressure off the NHS, and the only way to do that is to follow the current lockdown.
And with record numbers losing their lives, when might lockdown start to lift and classrooms start to fill?
Will schools reopen again after the half term?
Whether we can begin to do that depends on a number of things. It depends on the success of the vaccination programme. It depends on us not finding something else out about the disease that makes us recalculate. The crucial thing is that the overall lockdown measures have got to continue to work. What we're seeing today, as I speak to you, is some early signs of progress, but it is far, far too early for us to say that this means that we can go into any kind of relaxation in the middle of February.
This is still a long haul. And whether it's Boris Johnson describing himself the standard of some free school lunches as a scandal, or pressure on the rollout of the vaccine, the pandemic has caused difficulty in so many areas. But there were also demands about a new threat. The government says it's concerned about a strain of the virus emerging in Brazil. Already, Brits can't fly there. But should there be a ban the other way round?
Why aren't you taking immediate action on a precautionary basis?
We are, and we're putting in extra measures to ensure that people coming from Brazil are checked and indeed stopping people coming from Brazil.
So has a new travel ban been announced?
We are taking steps to ensure that we do not see the import of this new variant from Brazil.
As of today,
So is that a ban? Not yet.
You just keep using the words, we're putting in place stronger measures. But please, tell me what they actually are.
But a pretty heavy hint that it could be soon. Ministers are likely to decide tomorrow how to handle another new strain.
These sessions, notoriously, can be really tricky. But the Prime Minister was unusually direct and to the point, with hardly any of his common flowery language. The government is straining to contain the worst days of a long crisis that has weeks and maybe months to run. Ministers have rarely had so much pressure on them, but there's hardly ever been a situation like this affecting all of us. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Westminster.
The Prime Minister has condemned the quality of some of the food parcels sent to children on free school meals in England during the lockdown, saying they're an insult to those who received them. But Labour says the list of foodstuffs closely resembles the government guidelines. The issue has been highlighted by the footballer Marcus Rashford, who spoke to the Prime Minister today. Our education correspondent Elaine Dunkley has more.
For many families, the challenges of lockdown go beyond learning. Free school meals are a lifeline for those who are struggling. In the first lockdown, Hannah received vouchers. Now she gets food parcels for her 2 children and is finding it difficult to manage.
And it's the same parcel that you get every time. And then we've had it again now for the lockdown. So we've had last week and this week. It was just like a kick in the gut. I was fed up and thought, oh, why couldn't you just give us the vouchers, was really the feeling. It's a very challenging household if the children are hungry and wanting things and haven't got it available to them.
This image of a food parcel posted by a parent has gone viral, shared by millions and attracting the attention of footballer and food poverty campaigner Marcus Rashford. Chartwell's, the company who supplied it, said this was for lunches for 5 days, but has apologised. It's prompted this exchange in the House of Commons.
So can I ask the Prime Minister, would he be happy with his kids living on that? And if not, why is he happy for other people's kids to do so?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't think anybody in this House is happy with the disgraceful images that we've seen of the food parcels that have been offered. They are appalling. They're an insult to the families that have received them.
Labour says the images being criticised are close to government guidelines. This is what's in some photos, but if you take out these, and if you add these, this is what the government recommends for a child's lunches for 5 days. Many families have been happy with the food parcels, and the government says it will be offering parents the option of a national voucher scheme. But this head teacher says it should have been done sooner.
We spent weeks trying to get that system running. Then now it is running smoothly, or it has the capacity to run smoothly. We saw that, and they chose not to use it. It's hard to see what was behind that decision.
The pandemic has exposed the issue of food poverty and has forced the government to make a number of U-turns. Leading charities are calling for a review, and parents like Hannah are calling for consideration and compassion for families that are struggling. Elaine Dunkley, BBC News.
The Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, has asked the exams watchdog to explore whether A-level, AS and GCSE students in England can sit mini-exams and external assessments just a week after their summer exams were cancelled. The Minister said the tests would help to determine fair grades. Mr Williamson also promised not to use an algorithm to rank students following criticism about its use last year. The UK's major supermarkets have warned the government that an urgent intervention is needed to prevent more disruption to Northern Ireland's food supplies. Since the UK separated from the EU, there have been new checks and paperwork on food products being shipped over the Irish Sea, which have caused delays. For over a week now, shoppers in Northern Ireland have seen shortages in some supermarkets. Here's our island correspondent, Emma Vardy.
Overnight, the way we get food into Northern Ireland from Great Britain has hugely changed, and shoppers are noticing.
Thought I would give everyone a quick update on local supermarkets in Northern Ireland. I spent an hour today driving around looking for somewhere just to get fruit and veg.
So I've just done a quick shop in my local supermarket. Some very noticeable gaps, particularly in the frozen food section. Hardly any frozen vegetables. I did manage to grab some frozen peas. Also in the refrigerated aisles where the juice normally is, really sparse there as well. Today, supermarkets said the initial delays with bringing goods over the Irish Sea are being resolved, but more red tape's on the horizon. New health certificates will be needed for food products arriving at ports like Belfast from April. And now major supermarkets, including Asda, Sainsbury's and Tesco's, have warned the government there could be more disruption in the coming months.
saying increased bureaucracy and certification in such a short timescale are unworkable.
Absolutely, if we do not find a solution and a workable solution for retailers in the next couple of months, we do face significant disruption in Northern Ireland.
The grace periods for supermarkets and their suppliers are...
Today, Michael Gove, the Cabinet Minister in charge of Brexit, responded to concerns raised by Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionists, saying the government would do more to make sure companies are better informed about the new rules they need to comply with.
We're working with companies across Great Britain to help them understand the new requirements for moving goods, and the extensive government support includes the Trader Support Service, to which more than 25,000 businesses are now signed up. Yet we know that still more needs to be done. That's why we're stepping up direct engagement with suppliers to ensure that they have access to the real-time guidance that they need.
These initial gaps in supplies are expected to disappear, but supermarkets have said they want to discuss a future solution directly with the EU. If one isn't found, Northern Ireland may see even more empty shelves in the months to come. Emma Vardy, BBC News, Belfast.
And finally, the British tennis player Francesca Jones, who's making impressive progress in world rankings, is through to her first major international tournament after winning a qualifying round for the Australian Open. The 20-year-old, who has a rare genetic condition that means she was born with 3 fingers and a thumb on each hand, won in just 1 hour and 1 minute. Joe Wilson reports.
One camera on court in Dubai captured the moment. What does this mean to Francesca Jones? Well, just look and listen. 6-love, 6-1, she's qualified for Australia for a Grand Slam. Next match will be the big time.
There has been a lot of hard work, and you know, sometimes I think that might show on the court. I can be really emotional, and you know, I put everything I can into the ball, and that's as a consequence of the decisions I've made so far and the commitments that I've made so far, I guess.
Tennis began in Yorkshire, but the family relocated to Spain by the time Fran was 10. The rare syndrome she was born with means that Francesca has thumbs and 6 fingers. She was born without some toes too. She's achieved in sport what some experts told her was impossible.
You know, a lot of people have referred to the doctor who told me that I couldn't play, but this isn't, you know, this isn't to prove him wrong. It's to prove to people what you can do.
What is your potential, Francesca?
So far, just seeing what working hard every day does and where that can take me.
It takes her now to Australia, to quarantine and then the Grand Slam. Not to prove people wrong, but to show what can be done. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
And that's it from us now on BBC One. It's time for the news where you are. Good night.